A dark symbol etched on skin, a shadowy conspiracy taking over the world, a test of faith that could doom your soul. The mark of the beast from the Bible's book of Revelation has captured imaginations and sparked fear for centuries. But what if everything you've heard about this infamous prophecy is wrong? What if the real meaning of the mark is far more profound and urgent than most people realize? The stakes couldn't be higher when it comes to understanding this ancient warning. If we misinterpret the mark of the beast, we might end up living in constant paranoia, seeing evil conspiracies around every corner. Even worse, we could miss the true spiritual danger it points to, leaving ourselves vulnerable to deception. But if we can grasp its real meaning, we'll gain crucial insight into navigating the challenges of faith in our modern world. Let's dive into what the Bible actually says about this mysterious mark. In the book of Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, we're told of a beast that rises from the sea, demanding that everyone worship it. Those who refuse will be unable to buy or sell anything. The beast forces people to receive a mark on their right hand or forehead, without which they can't participate in society or commerce. This vivid imagery has led to all sorts of wild theories over the years. Some have claimed the mark is a literal tattoo or microchip implant. Others point to various technologies like credit cards or smartphones as the mark in disguise. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some even suggested vaccines were secretly the mark of the beast. But these ideas miss the point entirely. To understand what John, the author of Revelation, was really trying to convey, we need to look at the bigger picture. Revelation is a book full of symbolism and figurative language. It wasn't meant to be a precise blueprint of future events, but a message of hope and warning to persecuted Christians. When Revelation was written, the Roman Empire ruled with an iron fist. Emperor worship was mandatory, and those who refused faced dire consequences. Christians, who wouldn't bow to any god but their own, found themselves outcasts from society, unable to work or trade freely. Sound familiar? The beast in Revelation represents oppressive human systems that set themselves up in God's place. Its mark symbolizes allegiance to these systems, choosing loyalty to earthly powers over faithfulness to God. It's not about a physical mark, but a spiritual choice. This understanding changes everything. Instead of scanning for hidden conspiracies or fearing new technologies, we should be asking ourselves, what are the beasts in our world today? What systems or ideologies demand our ultimate loyalty, pulling us away from God? Maybe it's rampant consumerism, telling us our worth comes from what we own. Perhaps it's extreme nationalism, valuing country over faith. Or it could be the cult of celebrity and social media, where likes and follows become our measure of value. These are the real dangers, not some futuristic microchip. The mark of the beast isn't something that will be forced on us against our will. It's a choice we make every day in big and small ways. Do we compromise our values for financial gain? Do we stay silent about injustice to fit in? Do we put our trust in earthly leaders or institutions instead of God? Understanding the mark this way is both freeing and challenging. We don't need to live in fear of some future apocalyptic scenario. But we do need to constantly examine our hearts and actions. Are we subtly allowing the values of the beast to shape us, or are we standing firm in our faith? This interpretation aligns much better with the overall message of Revelation and the teachings of Jesus. The book wasn't written to scare believers or provide a secret code to unlock the future. It was meant to encourage Christians facing persecution, reminding them that God is ultimately in control and that faithfulness will be rewarded. The number 666, often associated with the mark of the beast, further supports this symbolic interpretation. In ancient Hebrew, letters had numeric values, and 666 likely represented Emperor Nero, a brutal persecutor of Christians. This shows that John was addressing the immediate concerns of his audience, not predicting some far-off future event. So how should we apply this understanding to our lives today? First, we need to stay alert to the subtle ways our culture might be pulling us away from God. This doesn't mean withdrawing from society, but rather engaging with it thoughtfully and critically. We should ask ourselves tough questions. Where do I place my ultimate trust? What shapes my values and decisions more, in my faith or the pressures of society? Am I willing to stand up for what's right, even if it costs me something? It's also crucial to remember that the mark of the beast is contrasted in Revelation with the seal of God on believers' foreheads. This seal represents God's protection and ownership of His people. Our primary focus shouldn't be on avoiding some nebulous mark, but on living in a way that shows we belong to God. This means cultivating a deep, personal relationship with God through prayer, studying Scripture, and being part of a faith community. It means allowing God's love to transform us from the inside out, shaping our thoughts, actions, and priorities. We also need to be discerning about the information we consume. In an age of constant news and social media, it's easy to get caught up in fear-mongering and conspiracy theories. Instead, we should focus on reliable sources and seek wisdom from mature believers and respected religious leaders. The mark of the beast serves as a powerful reminder that our choices matter. Every day, we are faced with decisions that either align us more closely with God's kingdom or pull us towards worldly values. It's not about a one-time, dramatic choice, but the cumulative effect of many small decisions over time. This understanding should motivate us to live with purpose and integrity. We're called to be in the world, but not of it, as Jesus said. This means actively engaging with our communities and culture, but always keeping our primary allegiance to God. It's important to note that this interpretation doesn't downplay the seriousness of the mark of the beast. If anything, it makes it more relevant and urgent for our daily lives. We're not waiting for some future event to test our faith, we're being tested right now, in countless small ways. The good news is that we don't face this challenge alone. God promises to give us the strength and wisdom we need to navigate these complex issues. We also have the support of our faith communities, where we can wrestle with these ideas together and encourage one another to stay true to our beliefs. As we grapple with the true meaning of the mark of the beast, we should be filled with hope, not fear. Revelation's message is ultimately one of God's victory over evil and the restoration of all things. Our job is to remain faithful, trusting that God is in control even when the world seems chaotic. This faithful living might look different for each person. For some, it could mean choosing a less lucrative career that aligns better with their values. For others, it might involve speaking up against injustice in their workplace or community. It could mean making intentional choices about how we spend our time and money, ensuring that these reflect our priorities as believers. The concept of the mark of the beast also challenges us to think beyond our individual choices. How can we work to create systems and societies that reflect God's values of justice, compassion, and human dignity? This might involve political engagement, community service, or supporting organizations that fight against oppression and exploitation. It's crucial to approach this topic with humility and grace. Throughout history, well-meaning believers have made confident predictions about the mark of the beast, only to be proven wrong. We should be cautious about claiming absolute certainty in our interpretations, always remaining open to deeper understanding. At the same time, we shouldn't shy away from discussing these important issues. The symbolism in Revelation can spark meaningful conversations about faith, ethics, and the challenges of living as believers in a complex world. As we continue to explore the meaning of the mark of the beast, let's keep our focus on what truly matters, growing in our relationship with God and allowing that relationship to transform every aspect of our lives. The real power of this prophecy lies not in solving a puzzle, but in challenging us to live with unwavering faith and integrity in a world that often pulls us in different directions. The ultimate message of Revelation is one of hope. No matter how dark things may seem, God is working out His purposes in history. Our call is to remain faithful, trusting that in the end, love and justice will triumph. Throughout history, people have tried to pinpoint exactly what the mark of the beast might be. Some thought it was linked to specific rulers or empires. Others looked for clues in new technologies or social changes. But to really grasp what John was writing about, we need to step back in time and understand the world he lived in. When John wrote Revelation, the Roman Empire was at the height of its power. For many people, especially in the eastern parts of the empire, the emperor wasn't just a political leader, he was worshipped as a god. This was a huge problem for Christians. They believed in one God and couldn't accept the idea of treating the emperor as divine. The empire didn't take kindly to this refusal. Christians faced all sorts of trouble. They might lose their jobs, be cut off from their families, or even be killed for their faith. It was a scary time to be a believer. John wrote Revelation to encourage these persecuted Christians and remind them that God was still in control, no matter how bad things looked. In this context, the idea of a mark takes on new meaning. In the ancient world, slaves and soldiers were often marked to show who they belonged to. The mark of the beast, then, isn't about a literal, physical mark. It's about showing allegiance, declaring who you really serve and worship. This historical background helps us see that the mark of the beast is more about loyalty and identity than any specific technology or system. It's a powerful symbol of choosing earthly power and comfort over faithfulness to God. But what about the number 666? This famous number has sparked countless theories and a fair bit of fear. Some have tried to find hidden meanings in it or link it to specific people. But the answer might be simpler than we think. In ancient Hebrew and Greek, letters also stood for numbers. This meant you could turn names into numbers, a bit like a code. Many scholars believe that 666 is the numeric value of Nero Caesar in Hebrew. Nero was a Roman emperor known for brutally persecuting Christians. By using this number, John could criticize the empire without directly naming the emperor, a dangerous thing to do in those times. It was a way of saying, this beastly system looks a lot like Nero and other oppressive rulers. Understanding these historical and symbolic meanings doesn't make the mark of the beast less important. If anything, it makes it more relevant to our lives today. Instead of worrying about a future mark, we need to think about the choices we make right now. Are we compromising our beliefs for the sake of fitting in or getting ahead? Are we putting our trust in earthly systems instead of in God? Today, we might not face the same kind of persecution early Christians did. But we still deal with pressures that can pull us away from our faith. The beasts of our time might look different, but they're just as real. Think about how much of our world revolves around money and possessions. We're constantly told that having more stuff will make us happy. Social media shows us pictures of people with seemingly perfect lives, making us feel like we need to keep up. Political leaders and celebrities ask for our total loyalty. Even technology, which can be a great tool, sometimes seems to demand all our attention and time. These aren't necessarily evil things on their own. But when they start to take the place of God in our lives, when we look to them for our sense of worth, security, or happiness, that's when they become dangerous. That's when they start to look a lot like the beast John was warning about. So how do we avoid taking on this modern-day mark? It starts with being aware. We need to pay attention to what's shaping our thoughts, values, and decisions. Are we letting God's word guide us, or are we just going along with what everyone else is doing? It also means being willing to stand out sometimes. Following God might mean making choices that seem strange to others. Maybe it's being generous when everyone else is looking out for themselves. Or speaking up for what's right, even when it's not popular. It could be choosing to spend time serving others instead of always chasing after more money or status. This isn't always easy. Just like the early Christians, we might face consequences for staying true to our faith. We might miss out on certain opportunities or feel left out sometimes. But Revelation reminds us that in the long run, faithfulness to God is always worth it. It's important to remember that we're not just saying no to the world's values. We're saying yes to something much better. When we choose to align ourselves with God instead of the beast, we're choosing a life of real purpose, joy, and freedom. We're becoming part of God's bigger story of redeeming the world. This understanding of the mark of the beast is both challenging and freeing. It's challenging because it asks us to constantly examine our hearts and choices. but it's freeing because we don't have to live in fear of some future mark being forced on us. Instead, we can focus on living out our faith every day, in big and small ways. Living with this awareness doesn't mean we have to completely separate ourselves from society. Jesus called us to be in the world, but not of it. This means engaging with our communities and culture, but always keeping our primary loyalty to God. We can use technology, participate in the economy, and be involved in politics, but we do it all through the lens of our faith. The idea of the mark of the beast also reminds us that our individual choices are part of a bigger picture. When we choose faithfulness, we're not just affecting our own lives. We're showing others a different way to live. We're participating in God's work of bringing light to the world. In our complex, fast-paced world, staying true to our faith can feel overwhelming sometimes. But we don't have to figure it all out on our own. That's why being part of a faith community is so important. Together, we can encourage each other, share wisdom, and help each other stay on track. In a world full of distractions and competing loyalties, how do we stay true to our faith? Understanding the real meaning of the mark of the beast gives us some important clues. It's not about avoiding a specific technology or running from society. Instead, it's about actively choosing to put God first in every area of our lives. One key way to do this is by nurturing our spiritual lives. This means making time for prayer, not just as a routine, but as a real conversation with God. It means diving into the Bible, not just reading it, but really thinking about how it applies to our lives today. And it means being part of a faith community, surrounding ourselves with people who can encourage us and keep us accountable. Another important step is to be mindful of what we're filling our minds with. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with information and messages. Some of these can slowly shape our thinking in ways that pull us away from God. It's important to be selective about what we watch, read, and listen to. This doesn't mean cutting ourselves off from the world, but rather being intentional about seeking out content that aligns with our values and helps us grow in our faith. We also need to be willing to question the values our society promotes. Are we chasing after success, money, or fame because that's what everyone else is doing? Or are we making choices based on what God says is important? Sometimes, following God might mean going against the flow, making choices that others don't understand. But Revelation reminds us that staying faithful to God is always worth it in the end. It's also crucial to remember that avoiding the mark isn't just about what we don't do. It's about actively choosing to live in a way that reflects God's love and justice in the world. This might mean standing up against injustice when we see it, even if it's uncomfortable. It could mean being generous with our time and resources, even when the world tells us to look out for ourselves first. It's about letting our faith shape not just our personal lives, but how we engage with our communities and the wider world. When we talk about things like the mark of the beast, it's easy to feel scared or overwhelmed. But that's not the message of Revelation at all. In fact, it's a book full of hope and encouragement for believers. Yes, Revelation talks about difficult times and challenges that believers might face. But it also paints a beautiful picture of God's ultimate victory. It reminds us that no matter how powerful evil might seem in the moment, God is in control. In the end, love, justice, and peace will win. This should fill us with confidence and courage. We don't have to be afraid of the future or worry that we might accidentally take on some mark. Instead, we can trust that as long as we're sincerely seeking to follow God, He will guide and protect us. God knows our hearts. He understands our struggles and doubts. He's not waiting to catch us out or punish us for honest mistakes. Instead, He's always ready to forgive, to guide, and to help us grow. This is the God we serve, not a distant, angry figure, but a loving Father who wants the best for us. This understanding should motivate us to live boldly for God. Not out of fear, but out of love and gratitude. When we really grasp how much God loves us and the amazing future He has planned, it changes how we see everything. Suddenly, the temptations and pressures of the world don't seem so appealing anymore. Living this way isn't always easy. There might be times when we feel alone or misunderstood. But Revelation reminds us that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. We're connected to believers all around the world and throughout history who have stood firm in their faith. And most importantly, we have God Himself on our side. So instead of worrying about a future mark, let's focus on making choices today that show our allegiance to God. Let's look for ways to bring more of His love, justice, and hope into our world. As we do this, we'll find that our faith grows stronger, and we become more and more the people God created us to be. The mark of the beast, when properly understood, isn't something to fear. Instead, it's a powerful reminder of the choices we face every day. Will we align ourselves with the values of the world, or will we stay true to God's calling on our lives? By looking at the historical context and symbolic meaning of this prophecy, we see that it's not about a literal mark or some future technology. It's about where we place our ultimate loyalty. Do we trust in earthly systems and powers, or do we put our faith in God above all else? This understanding challenges us to examine our lives closely. Are there areas where we've compromised our values without even realizing it? Are there beasts in our modern world, like materialism, self-obsession, or the pursuit of power, that we need to be wary of? At the same time, this interpretation fills us with hope. We don't have to live in fear of accidentally taking on some mark. Instead, we can focus on actively choosing God's way in our daily lives. Every time we make a decision based on our faith, every time we choose love over selfishness, every time we stand up for what's right, we're declaring our allegiance to God. The message of Revelation, including the warning about the mark of the beast, is ultimately one of encouragement. It reminds us that no matter how difficult things might get, God is in control. Our job is to stay faithful, trusting that in the end, God's love and justice will triumph. So let's move forward with confidence, not fear. Let's be people who are known for our love, our integrity, and our unwavering faith. As we do this, we'll not only avoid the trap of the beast, but we'll also play our part in bringing more of God's kingdom into our world here and now. Every day, we have the opportunity to choose whose mark we'll bear. Will it be the mark of selfishness, greed, and fear that often dominate our world? Or will it be the mark of love, justice, and hope that characterize God's kingdom? The choice is ours, and it's one we make not just once, but every single day in how we live our lives.